What transpired during Angie Stone's funeral will astound you. As a farewell to a legend who had contributed some of the most poignant and passionate songs to the world, it began as a time of sadness. To honor her life, friends, family, and prominent figures from the industry came together. But everyone was shocked by what happened that day. There was a lot of emotion in the air inside the venue, knowing they were going to bid farewell to someone who had impacted their lives. Many entered the room crying. Everyone was reminded of the strong voice that had defined a generation by the soothing background sound of Angie's song. However, none was ready for what was going to occur. This was no ordinary tribute, I assure you. It was something much more intimate, something that would alter everyone's perception of Angie Stone. One tribute after another flooded in as the program got underway. During their poignant remarks, fellow musicians recalled the knowledge and love Angie had displayed throughout her career. Outside of the arena, fans clung to one another while listening to her music and reliving the moments she had crafted for them. However, nobody anticipated that Angie's daughter would take the stage. She moved forward, her hands trembling a little, and the audience fell silent. Despite the obvious anguish on her face, she had a determined look in her eyes. This address wasn't merely a farewell. This was a very intimate matter. She inhaled deeply, surveyed the crowd, and started talking about her mother, as a mother who had given her everything for her family, rather than as a renowned artist. As she related tales from her early years, late-night conversations, moments of hilarity, and the lessons her mother had taught her, her voice faltered. She talked about the difficulties they had encountered, their disagreements, and the miscommunications that had molded their relationship. However, things became intriguing at this point. Nobody anticipated the turn her statements would take as she went on. She disclosed that Angie had been carrying a burden behind her success and notoriety. She had concealed this truth from everyone, including her own daughter. The space was still. Nobody made a move. What was the key? What was the reason behind Angie's prolonged silence? There was an intolerable tension in the air. Then Angie's kid, with tears in her eyes, uttered something that made everyone gasp. However, this is the startling part, she muttered, taking a moment to collect herself. I didn't know the full story until now. The audience let out a gasp. What was she trying to say? What had she just learned? She produced a letter from her pocket before anyone could comprehend what she had said. Her last message from Angie. With trembling hands, she unfolded the paper and inhaled deeply once more. The crowd waited to hear what was written within, as they leaned in and stared at her. Then, as she opened it to read it, an unforeseen event occurred. The screen behind her sparked to life as the venue's lights faded. The television displayed a video of Angie grinning subtly with a knowing expression in her eyes. Angie's voice reverberated throughout the room. If you're watching this, after that, I've already started the following chapter. A startled stillness descended across the entire stadium. For all of them, Angie had left a message. Her next statement, however, would alter everything. Time stood still in the room, even though she was no longer there. Angie's words reverberated throughout the space. Her eyes possessed the warmth and wisdom that had always characterized her, and her face appeared serene on the television. Don't cry for me, she added in a steady but passionate voice. Honor me, play my tunes, keep me alive. It became much more emotional at this point, though. Her tone changed as she went on, and a trace of melancholy appeared. There's something I never got to say, something I kept to myself for years. The crowd held their breath. What would she disclose? This felt different from Angie's usual candor regarding her difficulties. This had a personal touch. Standing on stage with the letter in her hands, Angie's kid was clearly shaken. She believed she knew everything there was to know about her mother. However, after hearing these words, she became aware that there was more, much more. I had to decide, Angie went on. One that should never have to be made by a mother. There was too much tension in the room. It was quite oppressive how quiet it was. People looked at each other anxiously as they moved in their seats. While some remained motionless, unable to comprehend what they were hearing, others were already wiping away their tears. The audience was rocked by Angie's shocking disclosure after that. She said, there was someone in my life who needed me, with a little shudder in her voice. However, I was unable to be there at the time as they were due. The room was filled with gasps. To whom was she referring? Was there a love lost here? A family member who was kept secret? Her daughter's breathing was shallow and her face was pallid as she turned back to the screen. Wei was the first time she had ever heard her mother talk like Wei. Whatever it was, Angie had never been able to express it while she was still living. It was something profound and agonizing. The film appeared to have ended for a brief moment as the screen flickered. Then it went on. Angie's expression darkened and her speech became hushed, as though she were addressing a single individual. Whispering, "I did what I thought was best," she said, "but I always wondered, did I make the right choice?" Her daughter gripped the letter tightly, her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. Her mother's remarks carried too much weight. Although she had always been aware that there were things they didn't discuss, she never thought it would be this serious. The audience was stunned beyond belief. Was Angie making a confession? A regret? A choice that plagued her? What was it, if any? There was a brief period of silence after the video went blank. The audience stood motionless, taking in what they had just heard. Then Angie's daughter carefully raised the letter again. She steadied herself despite her hands shaking. The last words her mother had left behind were this. She inhaled deeply and got ready to read them out loud. However, as she was about to speak, another unexpected event occurred. There was an intolerable quiet in the room. As Angie's kid gripped the letter in her shaking hands, all eyes were on her. She felt the pressure of her mother's comments like never before. However, she was ready to read when an unforeseen event occurred. The deep silence was broken by a voice from the audience. She wasn't discussing your opinions. The audience erupted in gasps, people's hearts thumping with expectation. They turned to see who had spoken. Slowly, a woman, an older person in black, moved forward. There were people who recognized her face, one of Angie's closest industry friends, who had supported her for many years. Her face was serious, but there was a knowing melancholy in her eyes. Her fingers clenched around the letter as Angie's daughter froze. Her voice was hardly audible above a whisper as she said, "What do you mean?" The woman inhaled deeply as though she were getting ready to reveal something that nobody was prepared to hear. Years ago, she informed me about it, but she never had the courage to speak it aloud, and she's finally expressing it now. The room was tense. It was oppressively tense. The woman went on. She wasn't talking about a forgotten relationship or a lost love. She was talking about you. There was a startled quiet. The face of Angie's daughter turned pallid. "Me?" she asked again in a broken voice. The female gave a nod. She felt as though she had to make a decision at one point. Her career was booming. More of her was desired by the globe. Her time, energy, and spirit were all demanded by the industry. But she had you at home. She was also afraid that she wouldn't be able to balance being a mother and a celebrity. She constantly questioned whether she had made the correct decision and whether she had given you enough of herself. The eyes of Angie's daughter filled with tears. She has felt the need to struggle for her mother's attention for years, always wondering if she really mattered to her and living in her shadow. She immediately understood that her mother had been suffering the same grief in this same moment. The woman went on, but here's the crazy part. Her voice was full with passion. She worried about it all the time. She carried that fear with her even when she was at the top of her game. And for that reason, she wanted you to know that. She loved you no matter what in her last days. The lips of Angie's daughter quivered. Tears were streaming down her face as she glanced down at the letter once more. All of a sudden, the words in her fingers felt heavier and more significant than she had ever thought possible. She inhaled deeply before opening the letter and starting to read. "My time has arrived, my darling, if you are reading this. But don't be depressed. I've had a life full of love, music, and meaning. Being your mother has brought me the most happiness. Observing your development and the light you bring to the world. Remember that you are stronger than you realize, and I shall always be by your side, wherever I may be." Despite the silence, there was a lot of emotion in the room. While some brushed away their emotions, others just gazed straight ahead, absorbed by Angie's comments. However, something unexpected happened just when it felt that the situation couldn't be any heavier. With a trembling breath, Angie's daughter muttered, "There's more." No one, not even Angie's closest friends, had been aware of the existence of the second section of the letter until she flipped the page. Everything altered because of what was written on it. The atmosphere in the room changed when Angie's daughter unfolded the second page of the letter. Time seemed to have slowed down, as each heartbeat, breath, and tear that hung in the air grew heavier. Nobody was sure what to anticipate. After taking a deep breath to regain her composure, she read the lines that had been concealed up until this point. "I've never had the guts to tell you about it." She trembled while she spoke, and I kept that in mind for years, trying to find the proper time. Leaning in, the crowd prepared for what was about to happen. However, Nothing could have prepared them for the impending revelation of the truth. After a forceful swallow, Angie's daughter went on. You used to believe that my career came before yours, but in reality, I nearly sacrificed everything for you. I had already decided. I was prepared to give up the limelight, the stage, and everything else in order to be the mother you deserved. Then something occurred. I never mentioned it. The room was filled with a quiet gasp. People looked at each other, attempting to decipher her meaning. What had prevented Angie from abandoning everything? As she read on, her daughter's eyes began to well up with tears. I once sat by myself one evening, gazing over a contract that may have put an end to my career. I had packed my things. I was prepared to abandon everything. I heard you singing after that. There was a murmur among the people. Although Angie's admirers had long been aware of her intense passion for music, nobody had ever anticipated this point in her life. The message went on. I heard your little voice humming one of my songs. That's when I discovered music wasn't just for me. It was also yours. Just as it did in mine, it flowed through yours. Furthermore, I was aware that giving it up would not simply mean abandoning my career. I would be leaving behind something we had in common, something that bound us together. I stayed because of you, not because of the world or the fame. Breathing shakily, Angie's daughter could hardly speak over her sobs. For years, she had believed that her mother had prioritized music over her. However, she now understood that every word, every song, and every performance had always been for her. There was no movement in the room. A few covered their mouths in disbelief. Silent tears were wiped away by others. However, another unexpected event sent shockwaves through the crowd before anyone had a chance to completely digest what had just been disclosed. Behind Angie's daughter, the television flickered to life. A shaky video started to play. Once more, the venue was filled with gasps as Angie's voice filled the air. If you're watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you myself, Angie's voice on tape announced. Her look was both composed and animated as she sat in a dimly lighted room. But I need you to know something. The room held its breath. All these years, I wondered if I made the right choice, she stated. And now, even though I'm not there with you, I have my answer. Tears were running down Angie's daughter's cheeks as she gripped her chest. You were always my greatest song. It was Assad who broke the stillness. People were no longer able to suppress their feelings. Every misunderstanding, uncertainty, and residual question about whether Angie had really prioritized her kid was destroyed by the weight of those words. However, the screen flashed once more right before it appeared that the emotional roller coaster had peaked. A brand new video started playing that nobody had ever seen before, not even Angie's best pals. And everything changed after that.